I used to tell people I had the kind of love story that made you believe in good men. When I met Grant Hayes, he seemed steady in a way that felt rare. We met in Chicago, at a small coffee shop near my office. He stood up when I approached the table, smiled like he had been waiting all day, and remembered my order the second time we met. He sent flowers to my desk with handwritten notes that made me feel seen. At that time in my life, being seen felt like a gift. I was Elena, a woman raising 2 young children on her own, trying to hold everything together with long workdays and tired smiles. I laughed loudly when I was nervous and pretended I was stronger than I felt. When Grant told me I deserved someone dependable, someone who would take care of me, I wanted to believe him. I was tired of being the one who always carried the weight. Our relationship moved fast, but it did not feel reckless at first. It felt safe. 2 years later, we were married. We bought a house in the suburbs, a modest place with a small porch and a maple tree that dropped red leaves in the fall. I remember walking through it for the first time, imagining birthdays in the living room and quiet mornings in the kitchen. The cabinets were pale, the windows wide, and the light made the space feel warm. I believed I was building a home. My daughter Emma was 6 then, curious and observant, always watching people more than she spoke. My son Tyler was 4, loud and fearless, with a laugh that filled every room. Grant called them his little crew. He carried Tyler on his shoulders at the park and braided Emma's hair with a seriousness that made her giggle. I watched him with my children and told myself this was what security looked like. The changes did not arrive with alarms. They came softly, disguised as concern. Grant began saying he worried about me. He did not like my friend Marissa and said she brought chaos into my life. He questioned why my sister Natalie called so often and why I needed to talk to anyone outside our marriage. He said couples should rely on each other, not outsiders. I thought it sounded reasonable. I wanted our marriage to work. I told myself that love required compromise. I told myself his protectiveness was care. When he frowned at my clothes or asked why I needed to go out so often, I adjusted without arguing. It felt easier to bend than to fight. The shift with money came next. Grant suggested it would be simpler if he handled the bills. He asked that my paycheck go into our shared account so everything would be organized. At first, it felt like teamwork. Then, he added spending alerts. Then, he started asking questions that felt sharp even when his tone stayed smooth. Why did you buy this? Why did you need that? Why did you stop at that store? Every answer felt wrong. When I tried to explain myself, he did not yell. He became distant. His silence felt like punishment. Soon, I found myself asking permission for things I used to decide without thought. $60 for groceries. $30 for a school trip. He would sigh and act worn down, as if my needs were unreasonable. Sometimes he agreed. Sometimes he said we needed to cut back, even while ordering things online for himself or talking about plans in Europe like they were proof of his ambition. The isolation settled in slowly. Grant suggested we leave Chicago, saying the city was unsafe and that a fresh start would be better for the kids. We moved to Denver, away from friends and family. He met the neighbors before I did and told stories that painted him as patient and calm, married to a woman who struggled. I did not realize then how carefully he was shaping the way others saw me. When I cried, he would tilt his head and say it proved his point. When I got angry, he lowered his voice and said I was frightening the children. When I went quiet, he accused me of shutting down. No matter what I did, the story stayed the same. I was unstable. He was understanding. The first time he hurt me, it was not dramatic. He grabbed my wrist during an argument and squeezed until pain shot up my arm and took my breath away. His face stayed calm. His voice did not rise. He told me not to make him repeat himself. I remember looking around our clean living room at the family photo on the shelf and feeling something fracture inside me. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part warned me that screaming would only make things worse. After that, the violence escalated in steps that felt almost measured. A shove in the kitchen that sent me into the counter. A door slammed hard enough to shake the hallway. A hand over my mouth during an argument so the neighbors would not hear. Each incident came with an explanation later, words that twisted the blame back onto me. He said I pushed him. He said I provoked him. He said he was only trying to keep things under control. In public, Grant was flawless. At school events, he was the attentive father. At restaurants, he was charming and polite. People admired him easily because he gave them no reason not to. I learned that cruelty can wear a friendly face. At home, he watched me closely, like he was waiting for proof that I was exactly who he said I was. I began doubting my own reactions. I questioned my memory. I wondered if I really was too emotional, too sensitive, too difficult. One night, after the children were asleep, he accused me of wanting to leave. I had not said the words, but I think he saw them forming behind my eyes. He led me onto the balcony of our second-floor bedroom. The night air was cold, the city lights distant. He stood close, invading my space, and asked if I thought anyone would believe me over him. Then he pushed. Not hard enough to send me over, but hard enough to remind me where I stood. My stomach dropped as if I were falling. I grabbed the railing, my hands burning with the effort. I whispered his name and begged him to stop. He leaned in and told me, quietly, that it would all be over soon if he wanted it to be. I did not sleep that night. I sat on the bathroom floor, hugging my knees, listening for footsteps. In the morning, he made pancakes and kissed Emma's forehead like nothing had happened. The normalcy felt unreal, like living inside someone else's life. That was the moment everything became clear. Love was not going to save me. Being patient was not going to save me. Even the system might not save me. But I still had my children, and I still had my mind. And for the first time, I understood that staying quiet was not the same as staying safe. So I began planning in silence, not because I wanted to leave, but because I wanted to live. The first time I called the police, I believed the sound of my own voice would be enough. I believed that fear was something other people could see, that my shaking hands and broken sentences would translate into truth. When I said the words he threatened me, I expected the room to change. I expected someone to look at me and understand that I was asking for help because I was running out of time. Grant opened the door before I could say anything else. He smiled like a man welcoming guests, not officers. He spoke calmly, clearly, like someone who had rehearsed the moment in his head long before it arrived. He said I was overwhelmed. He said I had been emotional lately. He said he was worried about my moods and my stress. He gestured around the house, at the clean floors, the quiet hallway, the children asleep in their beds. I stood there crying, unable to stop. Every word I tried to say came out wrong. My voice shook. My thoughts tangled. I could feel myself becoming exactly what he had described. Unstable. Too much. He was the one who seemed grounded. He was the one in control. When the officers left, they did not say much. They told us to take care of each other. They told me to try to rest. They believed the version of the story that was easier to hold. Grant did not touch me after the door closed. He did not need to. He stood in the hallway, blocking my path, and said quietly, "Now you know how this will go." There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. That frightened me more than shouting ever could. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop. My hands shook so badly, I had to rest them on my knees. I searched for shelters, hotlines, and legal advice. I read words like protection, safety, and exit plan, but none of them felt solid. I did not know who I could trust. I did not know who might call him if I reached out. Every option felt like a risk. Then a message appeared on my phone. It was from Marissa. She had never stopped sending small check-ins, even after I stopped replying. All it said was, "If you need a door, I can be one." I pressed my hand over my mouth and cried so hard my chest hurt. I buried my face in a towel so the sound would not wake the kids. It was the first moment in a long time where I felt something other than fear. I felt seen. From that point on, I began doing things that looked harmless, almost invisible. I saved cash when I could. $20 here, $40 there. I tucked bills into the pocket of an old coat in the back of the closet, behind winter scarves Grant never touched. It felt ridiculous at first, like pretending to prepare for a disaster that might never come. But every bill hidden felt like air entering a room that had been sealed too long. I took pictures of bruises when they appeared, even though it made my stomach turn. I hated seeing my body that way, marked and familiar in places that should have been safe. I recorded arguments on my phone when I could keep my hand steady enough to do it without him noticing. Sometimes my finger hovered over the button while my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I wrote dates and details on scraps of paper and hid them inside a recipe book he never opened. It was a quiet record of moments that might otherwise dissolve into doubt. I needed proof not just for others, but for myself. I needed to know I was not imagining it. Marissa helped me open a separate account in my own name at a bank across town. She drove. She waited in the car. She did not ask questions I could not answer. She did not rush me. She became something steady I could lean on without falling apart. I deposited small amounts whenever I could, never enough to draw attention. As the months passed, a terrifying idea began to form, one I tried to push away at first. It felt too extreme, too cruel. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense in a way that made me sick. A disappearance. Not because I wanted to abandon my children. The thought of that tore at me. It was because Grant had built a story about me that was already in place, polished, and believable. If I tried to leave openly, he would drag me back through courts and police visits and endless checks on my sanity. He would paint himself as the patient husband and me as the problem that needed to be managed. He had money. He had connections. He had a reputation. I had fear, proof scattered in pieces, and 2 children I could not protect if I stayed. Marissa knew a place outside Denver where people hiked near rough terrain. Not a dramatic cliff, not a tourist spot, but an area where accidents could happen without headlines. It was painful to think about, but survival rarely comes in gentle shapes. We chose a day when Grant would be away at a work event. I packed a small bag that could fit inside a plain tote. A few clothes. A prepaid phone. A photo of Emma and Tyler that I pressed to my lips until they went numb. I left my wedding ring behind on purpose, setting it where it would be found. I wrote a note. It was short. Not emotional. Not poetic. Just tired words that sounded final enough to be believed. I placed my purse where someone would find it. I left a scarf near the trail, not ripped, not staged too carefully, just enough to suggest a story, without screaming it. Then I walked away. I did not turn around. I was afraid that if I did, I would run back and undo everything. Marissa drove me to a bus station. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the ticket. My heart raced like it was trying to escape my body. All I could think about was my children waking up and calling my name. That grief will never leave me. I will not pretend it was clean or heroic. It was sharp and ugly and constant. I told myself one thing again and again, like a prayer I did not fully believe. If I die inside this marriage, they lose me forever. If I vanish, there is a chance I can come back for them later. I ended up in a quiet town in America, far from Denver, a place where no one knew Grant's voice or smile. I rented a small room in a house owned by an older woman named Darlene Pope. She asked only 2 questions. Could I pay on time? Did I need an extra blanket? I became Lena Cole. A simpler name. A smaller version of myself. I worked long shifts at a diner, then later at a warehouse. My hands became rough. My back ached constantly. I learned how to keep my head down, and my story short. I did not make friends. I did not share details. I moved through the world like someone trying not to be noticed. I sent money to Marissa, who passed it carefully to someone close to my children. Never too much. Never enough to raise questions. Sometimes $100. Sometimes $200. Once, when Emma needed braces, I sent $1,200 and cried until morning. I wrote letters to Emma and Tyler that I could not send. I kept them in a shoebox under my bed. I told them about the sunrise over the parking lot. I told them I loved them with a fierceness that scared me. I told them I was not gone because I did not want them, but because I wanted them alive. Years passed that way. Quiet. Careful. Lonely. I learned how to live like a ghost. And then one day, the past found me anyway. It happened in a grocery store under bright white lights, with a cart half full of the cheapest food I could find. Rice, canned soup, and bread that would go stale in 2 days. I was comparing prices, doing the math in my head like I always did, when a strange feeling crawled up my spine. The kind you get when you know you are being watched. At the end of the aisle, a man stood still. He was not reaching for anything. His cart was empty. His eyes were fixed on my face, not in a curious way, not casually. He was studying me, measuring me. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might faint right there between the shelves. I turned my cart sharply and walked away, telling myself I was imagining things. I moved faster, taking turns without thinking, my breath shallow. When I glanced back, he was still there, following at a distance that felt intentional. I left the cart where it was and walked straight out of the store, my hands shaking as the automatic doors opened. I did not stop walking until I reached my car. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so tightly my fingers hurt. I told myself I was safe. I told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. 2 days later, when I came home from work, there was a note slipped under my door. "Lena, please. I need to talk. I am not here to hurt you." There was no signature, no number, just those words on plain paper. My chest tightened, so suddenly I had to sit down. My hands went cold. My mouth tasted like metal. I stared at the note for a long time, hoping it would turn into something else if I looked hard enough. I did not need a name. I knew what it meant. A hired investigator. That night, I dug out the prepaid phone I rarely used anymore. The battery was low, like it had been holding its breath with me for years. I stepped outside, away from the house, and called Marissa. She answered on the second ring, as she had never stopped listening for me. "He found me," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Marissa did not panic. She did not ask 100 questions. She said only one thing. "Are you safe right now?" I almost laughed. Safety had become such a strange concept. But I answered honestly. For the moment. The next afternoon I saw him again. This time, he did not hide. He stood outside my workplace, leaning against a post as if he belonged there. When I stepped out after my shift, he straightened and raised his hands slightly, showing me his palms. "My name is Owen Price," he said. His voice was calm, tired. "Your husband hired me 2 months ago." The word husband landed like a blow. I had trained myself not to think of Grant that way anymore. "I did my job," Owen continued. "I confirmed your identity. He already knows." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the wall to keep from falling. "Then why are you here?" I asked. "Why tell me?" Owen looked at me closely, like he was weighing something. His face carried the lines of a man who had seen too many lives up close. "Because this is not a normal missing person case," he said. "He does not sound like a grieving husband. He sounds like someone who wants control back. I have heard the way he talks about you." I swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" Owen exhaled slowly. "He will come. Or he will send someone. He will threaten you with exposure, with court, with the children. He will tell you that you will go to prison. He will say nobody will ever forgive you." Each sentence felt like a stone dropped onto my chest because none of it was new. Grant's voice was already echoing in my head, calm and precise, explaining exactly how powerless I was. That night, my phone rang. I did not recognize the number, but I knew who it was before I answered. "Hello, Elena," Grant said, smooth and familiar, using my real name like a leash around my throat. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. "You do not get to say that name," I whispered. He laughed softly. "You always did love drama." Then he did what he always did. He stayed calm. He stayed controlled. He spoke in a way that made me feel like the unstable one just for breathing too hard. "You are coming back," he said. "If you do not, I go public. I tell everyone you abandoned your kids. I tell the police exactly where you are. I take everything. I take them. You will have nothing." "They are not objects," I said, my voice breaking. He ignored it. You think you can win this? You cannot. I have records. I have witnesses. People remember your little breakdowns. My throat tightened. You made those. Another soft laugh. The world does not care how it happened. They care how it looks. When the call ended, I slid down the wall and sat on the floor. I cried until my chest ached, until my face felt swollen and unfamiliar. Not because I wanted to run again, but because I finally understood the shape of the trap. If I kept hiding, he would always chase me. If I went back quietly, he would punish me for leaving. If I did nothing, he would rewrite my children's memories until I became the villain in their story. That night, I pulled the shoebox out from under my bed. I opened it and took out one of the letters I had written years earlier, when Tyler was still small. The handwriting looked like it belonged to someone else. The words were full of love and fear, written by a woman who believed silence was protection. Reading it, something sharp became clear. I had been trying to survive by staying quiet, but silence was his territory. I could not outdo him. I could not outrun him forever. The only move left was the one he had never allowed me to make. I chose to speak first. Marissa connected me with a journalist in America named Paige Benton. She was known for being careful, for not chasing headlines without proof. When we spoke, she did not promise justice or redemption. She promised the process. If you have evidence, she said, we build a timeline. We verify everything. We protect you as much as we can. I gave her everything I had. Photos of bruises, dates and notes from the recipe book, old messages where Grant's words twisted and sharpened, audio recordings where his voice shifted when he thought no one else could hear, bank records that showed money moving through accounts I never knew existed, patterns that revealed control, not care. Paige listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you have anything recent? I looked at my phone and said, he called me. That became part of the story, too. Then Owen added something I had not expected. He shared notes from his own investigation into Grant's finances. Shell companies. Hidden transfers. Grant used his public image to gain trust while doing darker work behind the scenes. It painted a picture far larger than my marriage. Grant had built a persona that people admired. Behind it, there were cracks. When the story broke, it did not frame me as a woman who disappeared. It framed me as a woman who survived coercion, control, threats, and a system that failed to listen when it mattered. Once the light hit it, it spread fast. People who used to smile at Grant began asking questions. His job placed him on leave. Friends who once called me unstable stopped calling at all. The narrative he had crafted so carefully began to collapse under the weight of evidence. Grant responded the only way he knew how. Calm statements. Polished denials. Carefully chosen words. But this time, the proof spoke louder than his charm. The court process was nothing like the stories people tell. There was no clean ending, no single moment where everything made sense. It moved slowly, heavily, like trying to walk through deep mud while carrying your own past on your back. Long days were sitting on hard benches, listening to my name spoken in rooms that felt too formal for the mess of my life. Every step forward came with a reminder of what I had done and why I had done it. I did face consequences. I will not pretend otherwise. Disappearing was a deception, even if it was born from fear. It caused confusion, pain, and lasting damage. There were hearings where I had to describe my choices out loud, in plain language, without poetry or justification. Each word felt like pressing on a bruise. Shame sat in my chest like a weight, not because I regretted surviving, but because survival came at such a high cost. At the same time, something else was happening. The truth was finally being allowed into the room. Not rushed, not dramatic, but steady. Evidence was laid out piece by piece. Recordings, financial documents, witness accounts, patterns that could not be explained away with charm or calm words. For the first time, Grant's version of events had to stand next to mine without the advantage of silence. The investigation widened. What began as questions about abuse and threats expanded into something larger. There were inquiries into extortion, into money moved through accounts I had never known existed, into the way Grant used his image as a reliable, composed man to cover behavior that depended on control. The story he had built for years began to crack under scrutiny. Calm explanations stopped sounding reasonable when they were measured against facts. The judge did not look at me like a villain or a hero. That mattered more than I expected. He looked at me like a person who made an extreme choice because she believed the ordinary path would lead to her death. He acknowledged the harm caused by my disappearance and also the fear that drove it. It was not forgiveness, but it was recognition, and I had lived so long without that. I was given probation and required counseling. I accepted both without argument. I needed counseling more than I knew. I needed help untangling how my world had grown so small without me noticing, how fear had trained my brain to treat danger like a normal room in the house. I learned words for things I had lived with for years. Control. Coercion. Hypervigilance. Naming them did not erase them, but it gave me a map. The hardest part of everything was the children. Seeing Emma and Tyler again did not happen in a dramatic reunion. It happened in a quiet room with counselors present, chairs arranged carefully, boxes of tissues on the table. They were older, taller, changed in ways I had missed. Emma's eyes were guarded, sharp in a way that broke me. Tyler held his shoulders tight, like he was bracing for something he could not name. Every instinct in me wanted to run to them, to pull them into my arms and promise that everything would be fine. I did not do that. I stayed in my chair. I looked at them and waited, asking permission with my eyes because I had learned what it meant to take space without consent. Emma spoke first. "Why did you leave us?" The question emptied the air from my lungs. There is no perfect answer to that. No sentence makes that wound disappear. So I told the truth as simply as I could. I left because I was afraid I would die, I said. And I was afraid he would take you from me forever. I thought disappearing was the only way to stay alive long enough to fight. Tyler's voice came next, smaller but sharp. "Did you ever stop thinking about us?" I shook my head hard, tears already falling. "Never. Not once. Every day was you. Every day was me trying to become someone who could come back safely." Emma's face twisted with anger, and she had every right to it. "Everyone said you didn't want us," she said. "They said you chose yourself." I swallowed and forced myself to stay present. "I did choose myself," I said quietly, "because you deserve a mother who is alive." The room went silent. Not the kind of silence that punishes, but the kind that lets words settle. No one rushed to fill it. No one tried to smooth it over. That mattered too. Healing did not come from that conversation alone. It came in fragments, stretched over months and years. It came from showing up when I said I would. From answering calls even when my chest tightened with fear. From listening when Emma yelled at me without trying to defend myself. From letting Tyler sit quietly beside me without demanding reassurance he was not ready to give. We did therapy together and apart. More therapy than I ever imagined. Some sessions left us exhausted. Others cracked something open that had been locked away for too long. Progress was not a straight line. Some setbacks sent me home shaking, convinced I had ruined everything beyond repair. We built a new life slowly. A small house in America with squeaky stairs and a backyard that needed work. It was not impressive. The paint was uneven. The fence leaned. But it was ours in a way no place had ever been before. The first year, I barely had $2,000 in savings. I counted every dollar. I took extra shifts when I could. Marissa helped me find a better job in a small office where my work was steady and my name was just my name. Occasionally, I was paid in pounds for remote contract work from Europe, and that extra help mattered more than I can explain. Most of the time, though, it was dollars. Ordinary dollars you check twice before spending. Dollars that represented safety, rent paid on time, and food in the fridge. Our circle stayed small. Marissa was family in every way that counted. My sister Natalie came back into my life carefully, with long hugs and quiet apologies that did not need to be spoken out loud. Darlene visited once, standing in our kitchen with tears in her eyes as she watched Emma and Tyler argue over cereal. She said it felt like exhaling after years of holding her breath. The children grew in their own ways. Emma found her voice. She joined the debate club and learned how to speak like she had a right to take up space, as her thoughts mattered. Tyler found music. He wrote songs that sounded like storms turning into clear skies, full of feelings he did not always want to say out loud. There were still hard days. Nights when Emma woke from nightmares. Moments when Tyler flinched at raised voices on television. Times when I lay awake, convinced that my choices had broken something beyond repair. And then there were mornings. Ordinary mornings. We ate breakfast in the kitchen while light came through the window. Someone complained about the toast being burned. Someone else laughed. In those moments, it felt like the world was not ending. It felt like real life. Eventually, I began volunteering with a local support group for women in America trying to leave controlling partners. I did not walk in as a hero or an expert. I walked in honestly. I told them what I had learned the hardest way. The system does not always protect you. Charm can be a weapon. Silence can be a cage. Proof matters. Allies matter. Planning matters. And I told them something else, something I had not understood until I lived it. This story is not about vanishing. It is about returning. Returning to your name. Returning to your children. Returning to a house that belongs to you in more than paperwork. Returning to the idea that safety is real and you are allowed to build it. I will carry what I did for the rest of my life. I will carry on what he did too. Those truths do not cancel each other out. But my children are here. I am here. And we are no longer living inside his story. We are writing our own.